There really is no better cross-work platform option in the gig economy like Uber. If I want, I could drive around passengers. I'm on their mobility platform. Or literally with a tap of a button, I change my preferences. Then I'm just doing delivery. Food delivery, yeah, some packages, maybe some shop and deliver, but just delivery. So when I listened to Uber's Q1 2025 earnings call, I listened for both changes in mobility for rideshare drivers, changes for delivery and delivery couriers. What is Uber doing right now as a gig platform for you? Well, in this call, Uber released some prepared remarks that cite a record 8.5 million active drivers and couriers globally. The number that I just last remembered was 7.1 million or so, and you can see here up 20%. That is a lot. In just a year over year, a 20% boost in overall earners on Uber. Now, yeah, the earnings were up 18% year over year. I mean, I always think about that and how that's measured, because if earners, the count is going up, like the supply, wouldn't naturally the amount that they're earning actually go up as well? There's more people that are earning. Anyway, here's their 2025 key growth initiatives: making a platform more affordable, unlocking lower density markets. They also call that sparse markets or suburban markets. So if you're in a medium, small, or even a market that doesn't have Uber yet, look for this in 2025. Scaling our growth bets, we'll talk about that, and advancing our AV or autonomous vehicle strategy. That is a key growth initiative. Regarding earner supply, they cite, quote, active driver growth remains steadily ahead of mobility gross bookings growth in Q1. They also expanded driver insights. It just gives you like a heads up of safe driving, harsh braking, speeding, etc. Also, drivers who maintain a certain driving score get access to higher earnings opportunities and improved matching. All right, but if you don't want to do mobility rideshare, when it comes to delivery offers, they say we are doubling down on retail categories, and they cite some new partners here. All right, but I want to get to the actual call here with CEO Dawal Khosrowshahi and CFO Prashanth Mahendra Raja. First question they were asked was about AVs and their pilots with partner Waymo in Austin. Citing that partnership with Waymo, CEO Dawal Khosrowshahi stated he's very encouraged with the partnership and cites Waymo's safety track record with healthy ratings. Their goal is to have a very, very busy and high utilization rates on these Waymo vehicles, which means that downtime would be much, much less than human drivers. And actually, back to those prepared remarks, Uber says we are confident that AV technology is the single greatest opportunity ahead for Uber. That is a bold claim. Well, I mean, looking back at their current partnership with AV company Waymo in Austin, Texas, they say these approximately 100 vehicles are now busier than over 99% of all drivers in Austin in terms of completed trips per day. And they plan to scale hundreds of vehicles in Austin over the coming months, and also are gearing up to launch in Atlanta in early summer. The AVs are busier than that's basically everybody, over 99% of human drivers in this pilot marketplace. Now that is completed trips per day, because as a person, you might need to take a break, go to the bathroom, get gas, you're declining offers. Now, if Waymo, it will basically accept everything. I imagine, yes, would accept everything. Could it, in theory, just accept the worst rides? Maybe like the block ride 2 blocks down the road where it wouldn't necessarily pay you as much as a human driver? What do you think? I gotta ask you, as someone who actually rode in one of Uber's first autonomous vehicles when they had their autonomous offices here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was a Volvo XC90 with LiDAR sensors, and that was, I believe, back in 2018. Fast forward to 2025, especially if you're in Austin, you've rode in one of those Waymos or even just other autonomous vehicles. Would you prefer that? That's the key word. Would you prefer that over a human driver? I mean, especially, let's say, if it's 40% less expensive? All right, but let's shake that off and turn our attention from rideshare to delivery and what Uber is saying there. Here, Prashanth mentioned that they have an upwards growth of delivery that's looking strong and that the cost per trip is declining year over year and quarter over quarter. Now, when I hear cost per trip on delivery, what does that mean to you? How could they decrease the cost per trip on delivery? Well, it could be less base pay. Uber is paying less base pay and they don't have to invest as much out of their pocket on each trip. Maybe they got higher fees, so there's more revenue, there's a higher margin, and in essence, less cost by increasing either customer fees or merchant fees. Or maybe a combination of both here, but certainly this one perhaps less pay, less bonus pay, which includes base pay, by the way. Base pay, promotional pay, all of that to the courier. But yes, cost per trip is declining. Let me know why you think that is. When we talk about Uber's expenses, specifically insurance, because they provide certain levels of insurance during your rides or trips on either their verticals here, that the headwinds or higher cost of insurance has been decreasing. So what does that mean to you? Uber trying to reduce the cost of insurance provided, then they'll need to go to whatever their insurance providers or whatever it may be in negotiating the cost of insurance here. They need to show that in essence, it's safer now than in the past, so they don't have to be charged as much to carry insurance on these drivers and couriers. That's why now in 2025, live in all US markets per Prashanth, the driving insights, which again shows you speeding, harsh braking, and whatnot. Now, I went through my entire Uber driver app, and Prashanth mentioned it's live in all US markets. I couldn't find it. Let me know where you can find driving insights. I've seen driving insights on DoorDash, but this is not DoorDash. We're talking Uber here. I looked basically everywhere. Live in all US markets, so maybe you can help me out there. And yes, we got to go back to the AV thing. They kept getting asked about AV, which I get if that's your company's #1 growth initiative. This is what Dara said. They're moving in the right direction, talking about a recent Waymo and Toyota partnership, just citing that, and then growth of the AV space in general. He said, let's say in 10 years, if every car came with level 4 or level 5 autonomy, that would be great for the safety on our streets and for our platform, the Uber platform, as those vehicle owners could then monetize those vehicles. And also cited, they've partnered with 5 new AV partners in just the past week. I mean, they're really leaning in to the AV thing. Do I think it's scalable right now within, let's say, 3 years? I don't think so in 3 years. Even 5 years? If we're looking at, again, that what I cited, the Volvo that was used with Uber AV tech in 2018, granted with technology, a lot of the times it's big step changes, exponential growth here. Yes, the tech's going to get better and better. We've seen companies like Tesla doing this with just vision only cameras without LiDAR, and then we calculate, accidents, etc., per mile driven. Scalability on the Uber platform, I don't see it, let's say, at least within 3 years. What do you think? Now, Dara also mentioned the other thing that's really trendy right now, large language models, think Grok or ChatGPT, and what Uber's doing with large language models. Now, Dara mentioned they're improving the customer experience. They're using large models in restaurant and grocery search right now for recommendations, better sort order, let's say, like better item sort, better restaurant recommendations, sorting those. And they're working with other large language models right now, but it's very, very early in the experimentation phase. Now, I'm not against large language models like GPT. I use it pretty regularly in my business here. But how could we use it to actually, the only thing we really care about is making more money on these platforms. We could use it maybe to aggregate all your data and see what's actually working. And they kind of look at some data. They tell you when it might be busy. They tell you airport trends and stuff, but that's not really as deep as we can get with these LLMs. And lastly, remember, I talked about the sparse markets or the rural markets versus suburban markets and what Uber's focusing on right now with that. Here, Prashanth mentioned, he clarified that the vast majority of their top 20 cities, the largest cities, continue to grow at double-digit rates. So even if you're in a larger city, you don't worry about it. It's not like it's necessarily slowing down per Uber. But Prashanth detailed that 20% of trips are coming from sparser markets on mobility. And they're actually launching hundreds of new cities in 2025. There's an Uber Reserve feature. Dara talked about this. So if you're in a more rural marketplace where perhaps you don't have as many drivers, that customer might reserve an Uber ride. So if you see a reserve request, you could also plan ahead for that as a driver and have predictability. The customer gets reliability, and that's being used more in rural marketplaces. But how can new features help smaller or more rural marketplaces? Watch this video. It's a new feature from DoorDash that seems to be quite a high-paying bonus targeting specifically smaller markets.